Aurora Brown and Intersectional Psychology acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout South Africa and their connections to land, water, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Indigenous people listening today. Hello and welcome back to Intersectional Psychology. I'm your host, Aurora Brown. I'm a registered counsellor in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm so happy to be back with you all. How are you doing? Let me know by commenting in your podcast app or emailing me at intersectionalpsychologypod@gmail.com. Today we're returning to our series on transgender health in South Africa to rethink autism and gender diversity. I'm very excited to welcome a guest who has both professional expertise and lived experience of the intersections we've been trying to hide. Siv Greyson is an autistic, African, and transgender liberation scholar. They are a gender diversity and inclusion specialist trained in social anthropology, sociology, and gender studies. In 2022, they served as the first gender and sexual diversity advocate in UCT's Faculty of Health Sciences. And since 2023, they have been working as a co-researcher on a position paper on gender-affirming healthcare for gender dynamics. Currently, they are pursuing a master's degree in gender studies at Nelson Mandela University. So, Siv, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Aurora. Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. So what can listeners know about you, your work, and your positionality?
Well, I'm Black, but I really like the term African. It feels like it grounds me more in the continent that I'm most invested in. And I am a researcher most of the time, a writer some of the time, a photographer if I can find the time. And I'm really interested in liberation, but not just for trans people, but liberation for all of us, not just oppressed, but people with potentially oppressive aspects of their identity too. Because I think these systems of oppression affect us all differently, but we are all definitely harmed by them. And I think that we would all be better off if we didn't have to deal with white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy. So that's me in a nutshell.
Absolutely. I love that framing.
I think I've been really moved by all of the feminists who have done some really important work at looking at the way in which gender normativity hurts men, and the ways in which patriarchy comes all the way around to hurt the people that it's supposed to privilege in this world. And I think that framework just really opened me up to the various ways in which the system can harm us. And I'm just really thankful for community like you, where we can just take the pressure off a bit. We don't have to perform a visual beauty for patriarchy today. And I think that's a win.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me that and creating this space. What does your journey with identity look like? How do being trans, neurodivergent, and a person of color intersect in your daily life?
Gosh, I think I want to hold on to the word intersect, because the naming of intersectionality is so useful in that it's not doing anything new. It's the word intersectionality just helps us understand how our different facets of identity are always coinciding at all times. I am never just trans or just Black or just autistic. I'm always all of these things at the same time. So when it comes to talking or thinking or feeling around how being Black, being autistic, and being trans affects my life, it shapes it. It's like the container in some ways under which my life happens. And my journey with identity has been quite a long one. I mean, I'm only 27, but I figured out that I was queer really early. I was I think 13 when I came out to my mom for the first time. And at that time, I'd only understood my queerness in terms of sexuality. It wasn't until after high school and being in university where I had more space to explore who I was and what felt right for me that I came to understand my queerness in terms of gender. But, one thing that I pretty much have known forever is that I'm black. That's something very hard to kind of not know in my case. And also, I guess what it meant to be black is something that I only came to understand over time because there's the experience of blackness through the lens of racism, but there's also a deep, very ancestrally rich experience of blackness that isn't defined by violence, but is rather defined by a certain celebration of communal humanness. And also, I guess studying shaped some of that as well. I did my undergraduate in sociology and anthropology, and my postgraduate has been a mix of different fields. So I was also, going through a process of learning how to think about racism, ability, gender, sex, identity, all of these things I was able to think through in a more academic level in university. But I would say like I've been engaging with what it means to have an identity, even the concept that you can take a human being and split them into words that kind of sort of account for their experiences but also don't, because I can say that I'm non-binary and someone across the world can say they're non-binary, and we could be talking about two very different experiences. So yeah, my journey has been one of a lot of learning, a lot of growing, and a lot of trying things on. But also I think it has really been shaped by, I just always had this desire for everyone around me to be okay. And I think that's what led me towards activism. So a lot of my introspection, my self discovery becomes just another reason or method or arena for me to do more activism, I guess.
You shared so much there, and like I say, you created this beautiful space, bringing in an understanding and an awareness of your ancestral heritage and how that plays a part in your identity. But I think also the fact that you started realizing that you were queer from a very early age, I think really shows, because you have such a maturity and a depth of self-awareness and self-knowledge. And like you say, I'm sure like academics had something to do with that as well. But I think I look at some of the trans people I know who came out more recently, or who discovered their gender or their sexuality later in life. And when you first come out, you are kind of going through puberty all over again, or through like this awakening of a part of your identity. And there's a part of you that is very immature still, because you haven't experienced life as that identity yet.
I like the term baby queer or baby trans in terms of queering time, in that sense that there's a youthfulness that happens when you, I guess, breathe into yourself for the first time. Even articulating and saying that I am trans or I am queer or I am bi or pan, just saying it can feel so new, so fresh.
So we've spoken a bit about the education system already, but how else do, racism, transphobia, or ableism show up or sneak into the consultation room or the hospital or the system that we're in?
The biggest way that I've personally been affected comes down to the interaction between myself and a healthcare professional. There's a lot of stuff that I can weather. I'm pretty strong. I shouldn't have to be, but I am pretty strong, and I can take occasionally getting misgendered by a security guard or the administrator using my dead name. It's not fun, but I usually can survive that. What becomes really difficult is when I enter into a healthcare professional's consulting room and it's just me and this person, and I'm being incredibly vulnerable because I'm sick in some sort of way, whether it's the flu, a tummy bug, my teeth are sore, or I'm needing a re-up on my hormones, whatever it is, I'm entering this space incredibly vulnerable. And I'm here to ask for help. And it is so jarring to have that person on the receiving end of your vulnerability either disregard you, not see you as a full living, breathing human, or have that person talk down to you, or to have that person display forms of microaggressions that you can't like quite name. I mean, I remember having a GP once tell me that I wasn't like other Black people, that I wasn't, in his words, like Zuma, Malema, or the Guptas, who aren't Black, but it's fine. I guess racism doesn't have to be accurate. I had tonsillitis at the time, and I remember being like, I am in so much pain. I am in such a cuck mood. I do not have the capacity to unpack why you can't say that to me. And I wanted to because I'm like this activisty person. And then you have other moments where I welcome curiosity when it's appropriate. But when I'm sitting in a dentist chair and your hands are in my mouth, I do not want to be teaching you the intricacies of why I have top surgery scars that you just so happened to notice somehow when I was taking off my hoodie or whatever. It can be hard because it feels as if people engage with trans people as if we are concepts, as if we are like this metaphor, whether it's a metaphor for sexual deviance or a metaphor for the collapse of African society. I don't know. People have really interesting ideas or conceptions that are tied to transness. And I feel like when you, as just Siv, walk into that room, you become the trans person, the trans community, the trans object, the trans subject, rather than a person who's got tonsillitis or a person who cracked their tooth. And it's disappointing. And it's also not something that somebody who's struggling with illness should have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving beyond healthcare, I mean, what we've kind of spoken about now, though that same kind of othering takes place in workplaces, schools, and public transport, is there anything else you'd like to say about those spaces before we move?
I'm currently the master's in gender studies. I'm focusing on trans people's experiences of public space specifically. And what I will say is so far it has been incredibly interesting to realize how much we rely on various identity hierarchies to decide how we treat one another on the street, in a taxi, at spa. That a lot of how we engage with each other as people comes down to whether or not we see each other as more or less powerful than a person. And it's been very tough to sit with this. It's a little bit easier because it is an intellectual exercise above, or rather an academic exercise above all. But it does kind of break my heart that, especially in a country like South Africa, where we're known to have this, people call it Ubuntu, but this friendly, communal, nyana vibe, that there is still so much white supremacy patriarchy. and ableism and all the things in how we interact with each other. And I think I've been feeling it too, being back in Gqeberha, which is a slightly more conservative city generally than Cape Town is. Of course, as cities are complicated, you'll get different experiences in different contexts. But overall, if you have blue hair in Gqeberha PE, people are going to stare at you. So, God forbid, your gender presentation is different, or whether you're a feminine, man, masculine, woman, trans, genderqueer, it gets weird. People do and say a lot of interesting things. So yeah, that's the only real reflection I have right now is I'm reading and also talking to people, but learning a lot more about the ways in which we police each other. And it makes me kind of sad in a way.
I'm hearing it again, the emotional weight that you are picking up observing these hierarchies. And, I think it's also those hierarchies that make people feel they have permission to ask people they perceive as a lower status than them, to ask them questions that they would not ask someone who's on the same, quote unquote, same level as them.
I think it's so tough because I've been seeing a lot of right-leaning spaces be like, what's wrong with curiosity? What's wrong with wanting to know something? And what's wrong is that I do not exist to quell people's curiosity. I have things to do. I have places to be. I have people to love and take care of. I do not have endless time and energy to spend.
To be honest, there are more than enough queer and trans and neurodivergent people on TikTok or on YouTube who are doing that educating work. If you want to know a question, Google it, go online.
Yeah.
I'm not your Wikipedia.
Yeah. And as much as I do think that I love education and I love being a teacher, we live in some very tough financial times that have forced me, unfortunately, to have to be incredibly careful with my time and with how much energy I have. I mean, especially post autism diagnosis, I'm learning that I have a lot less energy than I thought I did. And to avoid burnout, I have to kind of have an energy budget. When I have all these things going on now, you're a random stranger whose intentions I don't know. Your intentions could be good. I don't know that because I don't know you because we are strangers standing in the middle of a grocery store. To now have to take your word for it, to trust that you're not going to try and hurt me with your words because words can be very painful and harmful. It's just too much trust for me to put in a stranger.
And that kind of leads into my next question. So, what brings you joy? What makes life feel expansive and worth celebrating?
I was actually thinking about this the other day because I was having such a sad day. And I was like, you know what? It sounds really kitsch, but actually thinking about things that you're grateful for can really remind you that your life is not always gloomy. And the things that I came up with were my cat, Day. She is this fluffy, loving, cuddly, sassy old gal. She's 8 years old this year, and she brings me such joy. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I'll just stop my master's work and I'll just go up to her and bother her, and it's just the best that I get to do that. It's just the best. I also get a lot of joy from different kinds of food, especially pizza, burgers, and ice cream. So good. I like, an ice cream on a hot day by the beach. I think I was put on this earth to do that, to get an ice cream on a hot day by the beach. And sunshine makes me so happy. Spending time on a patch of grass with a picnic blanket and a person that I love or like or just find really cool. The best. I've really been enjoying Fortnite gaming, which is a lesser known fact about me, that I play this video game that's definitely made for 12-year-olds, but it's very fun. I also do a lot of card games on my phone. I think I'm really lucky in that. And I do think it's part of the autism and also part of the other identities, like being Black facing racism, being trans facing transphobia, being queer facing queerphobia. There's a lot of stuff to not be happy about, a lot of reasons to be going through the most, that I just get really excited about things that bring me joy. They don't just bring me a little joy, I have big joy feelings. A good hug. Oh, a good hug, a good phone call, because quite a few of my friends are, in different cities. There are all these little joys in my life that, when someone asks me, I'm like, damn, I live a good life. Yeah, there's all this stuff, but there's a lot of joy.
If you had a magic wand to redesign the public health system for neurodivergent trans people of color, what would it look like?
Free healthcare for everyone immediately. like, yes, it's a big question, but I would start at the part where everyone, free healthcare, and I I don't know how, but medical professionals need rest. I don't know how we can do that. It seems like medical professionals around the world are just permanently exhausted. It almost defines them in a way, but I think they deserve more rest and to have more time, especially in terms of, in my idea of this free healthcare, it would be public healthcare that everyone has access to that works, and that there isn't this huge disparity between what you receive and when you have money and what you receive when you don't.
I think those two things are tied together because the medical professionals who are so exhausted, it's only the medical professionals in the public system. Like the private
Yes,
GPs, they're doing
chilling.
fine.
They're doing fine. They have time. The ones
Yeah.
in, when I think about the struggles that trans, autistic, Black, poor, the struggles that people have who are oppressed in these medical spaces with medical professionals, I can't imagine someone who has no time and no moment to breathe, who is constantly holding the trauma of other people. I really don't see that person being okay enough to see me as a human. It almost feels like the system itself perpetuates healthcare that is inhumane, where people are just trying to do the best with very little. Even as a healthcare professional, having to look at someone and say, we cannot help you, you have to wait 30 years, sucks. I don't think anyone enjoys having to give that news to a trans person who's needing this surgery. So I think that there could be a lot more done in terms of support for healthcare workers in a public system. I also think that public healthcare deserves to not have all of its money stolen, so that the medication and tools and facilities could be up par, and not just in city centers, but or in urban areas, but in all kinds of areas. I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would start with patriarchy, racism, and all that. I feel like solving that stuff would solve a lot of the problems. Defeating capitalism would do a lot for healthcare. I think more than anything, I think it's the most painful part of engaging with different various forms of genocide around the world is realizing that the very basics that a human being needs in order to live. This is before we're talking about Lububu, way before we're talking about restaurants. I'm just mean like food, shelter, healthcare, and safety, that so many people around the world do not have access to those basic things. And that people are expected to do a lot more than just breathe and survive. You are expected to show up in particular ways that can be incredibly exhausting and taxing, and a lot of people just aren't given a chance, you know?
And then they're judged for not showing up because they don't have all of these resources and they're
Yeah,
just so burnt out.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
a vicious cycle.
So vicious. So my magic wand would definitely I would focus on making sure that people have access, and then making sure that the carers are cared for such that the people that they're caring for can be cared for too, kind of like a ripple effect.
Finally, what message would you want to leave for other marginalized people who are listening today?
So, comrades, it is lit right now. Fascism is making its way around the world. It has always been there, but it has never been so loud and so proud, at least since we termed the term fascism. And I will say that this is all a response to how much our activism is working, and we just need to keep working. We are one link in a long chain of aspirations towards liberation, and our goal is not to be everything for everyone everywhere, but to do our best with the capacity that we have. And we're doing good. It can feel a little bit lately the left is losing or falling apart, but I really do think that all that we're seeing is a response to how strong our work has been, and we need to just continue to be hopeful, because hope is what really drives change. We need to continue to make more comrades and find solidarity amongst oppressed peoples. I really do not think that women and trans people need to be fighting. Okay? I think we can all battle patriarchy together. I think that we get a lot more out of that. Just a reminder that rest is resistance as well, especially for oppressed folks. And to do a little joy exercise, I think. It was really good for me, just, having you, Aurora, ask me, what made me joyful. It just put a little bit more light into my gut. So, and make sure you drink some water. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you so much for being here. Where can listeners go to support you and your work?
You can find me on Instagram, the easiest, just at Siv Greyson. And my Instagram has links for all the other stuff, like my writing, my photography, some of my teaching. And yeah, feel free to pop me a DM. My DMs are open, but I do reserve the right to ignore a DM. So don't feel too much like you will definitely get a response from me. I am trying to leave Meta though, so don't get too invested in the Instagram.
Same.
I am building a website slowly. It just takes time.
Thank you, Siv. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you. This is a good chat.
And thanks to you, the listener, as well. Next week, we have the next episode in the Intersectional Scenes series. Last week, I introduced you all to the Fanon test for assessing the representation of mental health and psychology in media. So on 27th of October, I'm releasing the first episode that actually applies that test to a piece of media. And because it's the spooky season, we're starting with a classic of the horror genre, Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho. I'll have not one, but two very special guests to help me unpack the film. So join us then to see how we can use the Fanon test to think critically about the representation of mental health and psychological processes in the media we love. Until then, look after yourself. And remember, everyone has the right to live with optimal mental health. Thank you for listening to Intersectional Psychology. Please follow or subscribe to the podcast to get every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review Intersectional Psychology in your preferred app. It really helps other people find the podcast. This episode of Intersectional Psychology was researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Aurora Brown. For a transcript of this episode, please see the link in the show notes on your podcast app or go to intersectionalpsychology.com. You can also check the website or the show notes for a full list of references for this episode. A video of this episode with closed captions is available on youtube.com/@intersectional psychology. To support this podcast and get access to bonus content, including additional episodes and interviews, as well as more guided mindfulness sessions, please go to patreon.com/intersectional psychology. You can also chat with me on Blue Sky at intersectpsky.social and Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Intersectional Psychology. But mostly Blue Sky. Aurora Brown and Intersectional Psychology are committed to the Cite Black Women praxis. All episodes of Intersectional Psychology are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I, Aurora Brown, am not able to answer specific questions about individual situations. Always seek the advice of your health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this podcast. If you think you need immediate assistance, please call your local emergency number or any mental health crisis hotline. Everyone deserves good mental health.